What if the key to speaking better English isn't your mouth, but your mind? What if you could improve your English without saying a word out loud? Let me tell you exactly how I did it, and how you can do it too. Hello, my name is Olivia, and I want to tell you something that completely changed my life. I used to feel stuck when I tried to speak English. I had the words in my head, but I couldn't bring them out. One day, I found a strange but powerful way to practice English. I started talking in my brain. Yes, in my brain. No one could hear me, but I was having full conversations up there. This small habit changed everything for me. It helped me build confidence, think faster, and feel more natural when I speak English out loud. When I first moved to the US, everything felt too loud, even though no one was actually talking to me. I'd walk into a coffee shop and hear people chatting effortlessly, using slang I didn't understand, and laughing at jokes I couldn't follow. I would stand there rehearsing my order in my head, scared I might mess up something as simple as asking for a medium iced coffee, no sugar, with oat milk. And still, when it was my turn, my voice would freeze and my words would come out broken or too quiet. I hated that feeling. I hated knowing exactly what I wanted to say, but being too scared or unsure to say it out loud. The words felt trapped, stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. That's when I started doing something small, but powerful. I began talking to myself silently in my brain. It happened by accident at first. One evening, I was walking my dog Benny around the neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting this soft golden light across the sidewalk. The air smelled like someone's backyard barbecue, and the sky was streaked with orange and purple. I looked at the scene and quietly thought, wow, this is beautiful. Then I added more. The sunset is peaceful. Benny seems happy. Maybe I'll go home and make pasta. That was it, just a simple moment of observation, but it sparked something. The next morning, I did it again. I was brushing my teeth and I thought, don't forget to bring your lunch. You packed a sandwich and apples. Then while getting dressed, this shirt feels soft. It's good for work. I didn't say any of this out loud, but in my brain, I was talking to myself in English. And that's how it started. I wasn't just thinking random words. I was forming full sentences just like I would in a real conversation. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just trying to be natural, and that made all the difference. At first, I stuck with simple, everyday topics. What I was doing, what I needed to buy, what I saw outside the window. I'd think, I should take out the trash before it gets too full. Or, that guy in the red hoodie looks like he's waiting for someone. These weren't groundbreaking thoughts, but they were my thoughts. And I was practicing them in English. That was the key. I was thinking in the language I wanted to speak, without waiting for the right time to practice. I began to do it more often, and it became a little game I played with myself. Every time I was alone, I'd try to keep a stream of English going in my brain. Not just random words like apple, book, table, but actual thoughts like I need to call my sister later and remind her about Mom's birthday. I practiced while cooking dinner, folding laundry, or waiting at red lights. I didn't need anyone to listen. I didn't need approval. I just needed my own voice inside my head. And something interesting happened. My brain started to relax. Before, I would panic when someone spoke English to me. I'd freeze or mentally translate from my first language, and by the time I figured out the sentence, the moment had already passed. But once I started thinking in English, My brain didn't have to switch gears. The words were already there, ready to come out if I needed them. I remember one time at the grocery store, I had just finished telling myself in my head, "Don't forget to buy almond milk. You ran out yesterday." And as I turned the corner near the dairy section, a lady accidentally bumped into my cart. She said, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry." Without even thinking, I smiled and said, "No worries, you're totally fine." It felt automatic. For the first time, I responded in English without freezing. That tiny interaction made my entire day. I went home with a smile, holding a bag of almond milk like it was some kind of trophy. That was when I knew this brain-talking thing was more than a silly habit. It was a real method, a quiet but powerful way to build fluency. I wasn't just memorizing textbook grammar or reciting dialogues from a language app. I was having real-time, meaningful, personal thoughts in English. My vocabulary was growing, my confidence was growing, and my fear was shrinking. The best part? It was private. No one could hear me or judge me. I wasn't embarrassed when I messed up a sentence because it was all happening in my mind. And over time, those mistakes started to fade. I noticed I was choosing better words, forming smoother sentences. It didn't happen overnight, but it was happening. One of the most important lessons I learned during this time was to be patient with myself. I didn't expect perfect grammar or fancy vocabulary. I just wanted to get my ideas across. That made it easier to stay consistent. I didn't put pressure on myself. I didn't say, "You have to think in English for an hour a day." I just let it happen naturally. During walks, while cooking, during quiet moments when I'd usually just zone out. There was one evening, probably 3 weeks after I started this habit, when I realized how far I had come. I was walking Benny again, just like that first evening. But this time, the thoughts in my head weren't just basic observations. I was thinking about my day at work, a funny thing a coworker said, and what I might do over the weekend. And I was doing all of it in English. It was like my brain had switched languages without me forcing it. It felt so freeing. I didn't have to wait for a conversation partner. I didn't need a tutor or a textbook in that moment. I just needed me, my thoughts, my imagination, and a little time. That night, I sat on my couch petting Benny and thought, "This is working. I'm really doing it." And I felt proud. But then I thought, what if I took it further? What if instead of just describing what I see and do, I started imagining conversations? What if I pretended I was talking to someone, asking questions and answering them, just like I would with a real person? Could that help me speak even better? The idea excited me. I wanted to go beyond simple thoughts. I wanted to train my brain for real-life conversations, even if I had to make them up in my head. So the very next day, I decided to try. After that night with Benny, when I sat on the couch and realized how far I'd come just by silently talking to myself in English, something inside me shifted. I felt a new kind of hope, a quiet confidence, like I had unlocked a door no one ever told me existed. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just studying English, I was actually thinking in it. But deep down, I knew I needed more than just descriptions of what I saw or felt. Real life isn't just about naming things or repeating grocery lists. It's about connection, talking to people, expressing your thoughts, reacting in the moment. And I wasn't ready for that yet. That's when I got an idea that seemed a little silly at first, but turned out to be one of the most powerful things I've ever done. I decided to pretend I was talking to a friend. It didn't matter that no one was around. I wasn't going to say the words out loud anyway. This was all happening in my head, just like before, but this time with more purpose. I wasn't just saying, I'm tired or the sun is bright. Now, I was having fake but realistic conversations, asking and answering questions, just like I would with a close friend. In fact, I even imagined a specific person. Her name was Jenny, and in my mind, she was my American best friend. Jenny was the kind of person I always wished I had in real life. Someone who would understand me, not judge my grammar, and help me express myself in English without fear. Every day, I made up new conversations with her. I'd imagine that we were sitting at a diner, sipping iced tea, maybe sharing fries, and she'd ask, "So, how was your day?" And just like that, I'd start thinking, well, today was kind of rough. I was late to work because traffic was awful. Then my manager gave me a new task, and I didn't understand it at first, but I figured it out. I would picture her face, nodding, reacting to my answers. She'd smile when I said something funny, or look concerned when I shared something stressful. And you know what? That made the conversation feel real. My brain didn't treat it like a grammar exercise. It treated it like life. It's strange to say, but this imaginary friend helped me grow in ways no textbook ever could. I was finally putting my thoughts into complete conversations, not just one-word answers or simple phrases. When Jenny would ask follow-up questions, again, all made up in my head, I had to keep going. I had to find new ways to explain things. I'd think, how do I describe what happened in that meeting today? Or, what's the best way to explain how I felt when I got that email from my boss? These weren't easy questions, but they were real. They forced me to dig into my own life and describe it out loud in my mind in English. That made my vocabulary stronger, my sentence structure more natural, and my ability to respond to people way more fluent. Best of all, it was safe. No one could hear me struggle. No one laughed when I paused or picked the wrong word. Jenny was just there, patient and kind, always listening. It felt like training wheels for conversation, but the kind that actually worked. This practice became part of my daily life. While washing dishes, I'd imagine Jenny calling me and asking, "What are you doing?" And I'd reply in my head, "Just cleaning up after dinner. I made chicken tacos tonight. They were pretty good, actually." While folding laundry, I'd hear her say, "Got any weekend plans?" And I'd answer, "I might go hiking on Saturday. There's a trail near the lake I've been meaning to try." Even while riding the subway or waiting at the doctor's office, I'd carry on these little mind conversations. Jenny came everywhere with me, quietly tucked away in my thoughts. We talked about music, movies, my job, my goals, and my worries. And slowly, something magical happened. I stopped translating. The English words just came. They weren't perfect, but they were flowing. I didn't need to think in my first language anymore. I didn't have to convert my thoughts. My brain started functioning in English because it was finally living in English. I also started noticing something interesting. When I had a real conversation in English, like ordering food, talking to a coworker, or answering the phone, I felt more relaxed. I didn't panic. My mind didn't go blank. In fact, many of the responses I gave were things I had already practiced with Jenny in my head. It was like my brain had a library of phrases and reactions I could pull from, and that made me faster and smoother when I actually had to speak. One specific moment stands out clearly. I was standing in line at a local coffee shop, this cute little place I found near my new apartment. I was rehearsing my usual order in my brain, just to be safe. But then, a woman behind me tapped my shoulder and said, "Hey, do you know if they have almond milk here?" For a second, I froze. But then, just like in one of my imaginary conversations, I smiled and said, "Yeah, they do. I get it all the time." She smiled back and said, "Great, thanks." It was short and simple, but it made my day. I walked out of that coffee shop with my drink in hand and a heart full of pride. All those silent conversations in my head had prepared me for this. I didn't feel fake. I didn't feel nervous. I felt like a real English speaker because I was becoming one. My imaginary conversations also helped me connect with emotions in English. When I was sad, I'd talk to Jenny in my head and say, "I've just been feeling off today, like I'm tired but not sleepy, you know." When I was excited, I'd say, "I just got good news. My sister's coming to visit in November. We're gonna have so much fun." These weren't robotic phrases. They were real feelings, and I was learning how to express them in a second language. And then something beautiful happened. I didn't just imagine conversations. I started remembering real ones and replaying them in English. If someone spoke to me in my first language during the day, I'd later go back and think, how would I say that in English? And I'd play the conversation over in my brain as if Jenny were asking the questions and I was answering. That's when I knew I was leveling up. My brain wasn't just reacting, it was recreating, reflecting, improving. I also started giving myself little challenges. I'd pick a topic, like my favorite holiday or what I'd do if I won the lottery, and I'd have a 5-minute mental conversation about it. Sometimes I'd mess up. Sometimes I'd get stuck. But each time I'd learn. I'd think, wait, how do I say that again? And later I'd look it up. And then I'd remember it forever because I had used it in a context that mattered to me. Talking to an imaginary friend in your head might sound weird to some people. But for me, it was powerful. It gave me freedom. It gave me space to grow without embarrassment. It gave me practice with no pressure. I truly believe that pretending to talk to Jenny helped me more than any class I ever took. But of course, there's only so far you can go with fake conversations. After a while, I started wondering, what about those quiet moments when I wasn't doing anything special? Waiting in line, riding the train, just standing around. Could I turn those boring moments into something useful too? That question led me to the next phase of my journey. And once again, it all started inside my brain. After weeks of pretending I was talking to Jenny, my imaginary American best friend, I began to notice how different I felt. I was still shy when speaking English in front of real people, but something had changed inside me. My sentences flowed more easily. I could describe my day, talk about my feelings, and even explain things like how to make my favorite pasta recipe, all in my head and all in English. It was progress I could feel but not really measure. I wanted more. I wanted to speak out loud without freezing. I wanted to stop feeling like a tourist in my own conversations. But life was busy. I had a full-time job that drained me. Commuting took nearly an hour each way. My weekends filled up with errands and chores and calling family back home. I didn't have much time to sit down and study English. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need to sit down. I could use the time I was already wasting. All those boring moments in my day, the ones where I was just staring at my phone or people watching, I realized I could be using them to practice English in my brain. It started during my morning commute. Every day I stood at the subway platform, surrounded by strangers staring at their phones. I was one of them. But one Monday morning, instead of scrolling through social media, I looked around and started describing what I saw in my mind. That woman has a green coat and white earbuds. She looks tired. Maybe she didn't sleep well. The guy behind her keeps checking his watch. Maybe he's late for work. I did this all silently. Of course, just like I'd been doing with Jenny. But now, I wasn't imagining a conversation. I was narrating the world around me, live and in real time. Soon this became a habit. Standing in line at Starbucks, I'd describe the people in front of me. She's ordering something complicated, probably one of those seasonal drinks with whipped cream and cinnamon. Sitting in the waiting room at my dentist's office, I'd imagine I was texting a friend, telling them what was happening. They're running 15 minutes behind. I hope I don't miss my next appointment. Even during the most boring, mindless tasks, like folding laundry or loading the dishwasher, I use those few quiet minutes to think in English. These socks don't match. Where's the other one? I should probably throw out the ones with holes. It may sound simple, even pointless, but it wasn't. These thoughts, those tiny everyday ideas, were building blocks. And with each passing day, my brain was getting faster, more fluent, more flexible. And the best part, I didn't need to block off study time or schedule anything. I was already living these moments, riding the bus, doing dishes, walking to the store. So why not fill that empty space with language practice? That's when I truly understood something important. Fluency doesn't grow only in classrooms. It grows in the cracks of your day, in the quiet minutes most people waste. I remember one rainy afternoon, I was stuck in traffic on the freeway, inching forward mile by mile. Most people were honking or checking their phones or just staring out the windshield. But I sat there and started playing a game in my head. I called it, "What if?" What if my boss asked me to present at next week's meeting? What would I say? How would I introduce myself? Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia, and today I'll be showing you the progress we've made on the new account. Then I'd keep going, making up the whole imaginary meeting in my brain, practicing how I'd explain things, how I'd answer questions, how I'd wrap it up. By the time I got home, I had given a full 20-minute presentation without ever opening my mouth. Those what-if games became one of my favorite brain exercises. I'd challenge myself in different situations. What if I had to return something at a store and explain why? What if I met a new neighbor and had to introduce myself? What if someone asked me about my hometown or my family or my favorite movie? I started asking myself these questions during my idle moments, and I'd answer them silently in my head as if I were really there. These were real-life situations, and preparing for them in my brain made me way more comfortable when they actually happened. The grocery store became one of my favorite places to practice. I'd walk through the aisles thinking things like, Okay, I need spaghetti, marinara sauce, and parmesan. Wait, I forgot garlic. Where's the garlic? And if I couldn't remember a word in English, I'd picture it and try to describe it. It's the small white vegetable that smells strong. You chop it before cooking. Later, I'd look up the word and remember it forever because I had already used it in a real situation. I even started practicing my brain talk while watching TV or listening to music. I'd pause a scene and think, how would I describe what just happened? If a character said something interesting, I'd try to repeat it in my head and then come up with another way to say the same thing. This helped me understand tone, casual speech, and the way people actually talk in real life, not just the way textbooks teach you. And something amazing happened over time. My brain stopped getting tired when I thought in English. In the beginning, it felt like a workout, like my brain was lifting weights every time I formed a sentence. But now, it was starting to feel like second nature. My inner voice was becoming bilingual. I didn't need to force it anymore. The English just came. There was one specific moment that proved this to me. I was at the DMV, one of the most boring places on earth, and my number was 47. They were still on number 32. I had at least 30 minutes to wait. I pulled out my phone, but then I stopped. Instead, I looked around and silently told a story to myself in English. There's a guy in a baseball cap. He looks frustrated. He's been waiting too. The woman next to him keeps checking her paperwork. Maybe she forgot a document. The clerk behind the counter looks tired. She probably hates this job. And before I knew it, they were calling number 47. I hadn't even noticed the time passing. I had turned one of the dullest moments of the day into a solid English workout just by using my brain differently. The most powerful lesson I learned during this phase of my journey was this: your environment is your classroom if you choose to see it that way. You don't need fancy lessons or expensive courses. You don't even need to speak out loud if you're not ready. What you need is attention and intention. You need to look at the world around you and decide, I'm going to think in English right now. That's all. It's simple, but it works. Over time, I found myself doing it even when I didn't plan to. I'd see a funny bumper sticker on a car and think, that's clever. I wonder if I could come up with one like that. Or I'd watch a family at the park and think, their little girl looks so happy. I bet she just learned how to ride her bike. These weren't rehearsed thoughts. They were real-time reactions, formed completely in English. That's when I knew my brain had changed. It had stopped studying English and started living it. But even as I got better at thinking in English during boring moments, I realized something was missing. I was good at naming things and describing scenes, but what about how I felt? What about those deeper, more emotional thoughts? The kind you don't usually say out loud but carry with you all day. I wondered, could I learn to express my feelings in English too? Could I talk to myself about my fears, my dreams, my worries? That question led me to the next stage of my journey, and it's where everything started to become personal. It was during one of those quiet, rainy Saturdays that I finally understood something important. I could talk about the outside world all day. The people in the coffee shop, the traffic on the freeway, the sound of dogs barking down the street. But if I never learned how to talk about my own emotions in English, I would never truly feel fluent. Real conversations aren't just about observations. They're about connection. And connection comes from feelings. Joy, sadness, anger, fear, hope. That's when I decided to take my inner English practice to the next level. I had learned how to think in English during boring moments. Now it was time to learn how to feel in English. The first time I tried, it was harder than I thought it would be. I had just finished a long work week. It wasn't a terrible week, but it left me tired, mentally and emotionally. I sat on my couch with Benny curled up at my feet, scrolling through photos of my family back home. My little niece had a birthday, and my sister had posted pictures of her blowing out candles, eyes closed, cheeks puffed, pure happiness on her face. Suddenly I felt a lump rise in my throat. I missed them. I missed being there. I missed the way home smelled and the way laughter sounded when we were all together in the kitchen. In the past, I would have just felt that ache in silence. But now, I stopped and made myself think it in English. I feel homesick. I wish I could have been there. I love my niece so much, and I hate missing these little moments. It makes me feel far away, like I don't belong anywhere. That was the first time I translated a deep emotion into an English thought, and it hit me hard. Suddenly, the language didn't feel like a subject I was learning. It felt like a tool for survival, like breathing. I realized that by forcing myself to feel in English, I was giving myself a new identity, a voice that could exist in a second language. Until then, I had only felt safe in my first language. That's where my emotions lived. But now, I was building a new home inside my brain, and I was decorating it with English thoughts, feelings, memories, and reflections. That shift, moving emotion into English, made me feel powerful, and surprisingly, it also made me feel whole. From then on, I began practicing emotional thoughts every single day. Not out loud, not in a journal, just silently in my head. When I was anxious before a meeting, I'd think, I'm nervous, but that's okay. Everyone gets nervous. I'll do my best and take it one step at a time. When I was excited about the weekend, I'd smile and think, I can't wait to sleep in tomorrow. Maybe I'll make pancakes and listen to music while I clean. These weren't dramatic speeches. They were soft, honest whispers in my mind, but they mattered. One night, I got some bad news from back home. A friend I hadn't seen in years had been in a car accident. She was going to be okay, but it scared me. I cried not because we were especially close anymore, but because it reminded me how fragile life is. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, rain tapping the glass, and I let the feelings wash over me. Then I spoke to myself in English. Life can change in 1 second. I need to be more grateful. I need to call the people I love more often. Saying that to myself in English somehow made it feel more real. I felt like I was speaking not just to myself, but to the world. Like I was finally becoming the version of me that I wanted to be. Bilingual in language, but also bilingual in emotion. Over time, my emotional vocabulary grew. I started using words like overwhelmed, frustrated, peaceful, hopeful, disappointed, and grateful. I didn't learn these words from a textbook. I learned them because I needed them, because I felt them. And once I had the words, I used them every single day. One morning, I was walking to work and felt this odd sense of calm. I didn't know why. There was no special reason for it. The sky was clear, the air was cool, and the birds were singing on the telephone wires. It felt like the world was quiet and soft. I whispered to myself in my head, "This is a peaceful morning. I feel calm. I want more mornings like this." That might seem small to someone else, but for me, it was everything. I was no longer just thinking in English, I was living in English. This emotional self-talk began helping me in real-life conversations too. When a coworker asked me how I was doing, I didn't just say I'm good, like I used to. I could say, honestly, I'm a little tired today, or I feel proud of how I handled that project. I started sounding more natural, more open, more like my real self. And that meant people responded to me differently. They smiled more, they opened up more. I began forming deeper connections, not just in language, but in life. One of the biggest breakthroughs came after a difficult phone call with my mom. We'd had a misunderstanding. Her words stung, and after we hung up, I felt this mix of anger, guilt, and sadness. Normally, I would have curled up and pushed the thoughts away, but now I talked myself through it, in English. I thought, I feel hurt. She didn't mean to upset me, but it still hurts. I need to take a break and clear my mind before I respond again. That single moment helped me calm down, helped me understand myself, and helped me respond better when we talked again. English wasn't just a skill anymore. It had become my emotional safety net. I also started using English to reflect on my dreams and hopes. When I felt stuck, I'd ask myself questions in English. What do I want next? What kind of life am I trying to build? What makes me happy? And then I'd answer, I want to feel confident in every room I walk into. I want to speak freely. I want to help others who are where I was a year ago. These thoughts, these moments of dreaming, made me fall in love with the language even more. It wasn't just about vocabulary or grammar. It was about who I was becoming. Eventually, thinking about my emotions in English started happening naturally. I'd stub my toe and think, ow, that hurts. I'd watch a touching commercial and think, that made me tear up a little. I'd feel annoyed at a delayed train and mutter in my mind, of course this would happen today. These were normal American reactions, and they came naturally, because I had trained my brain not just to speak English, but to feel in English. And you know what I discovered? The more I connected my emotions to English, the more confident I became when speaking out loud. I wasn't just repeating what I'd memorized. I was expressing real things that mattered to me, that made my speech more fluid, more authentic, and more human. But still, I had one more challenge left. I had been living in my brain for months, building a world of silent practice. I had narrated my surroundings, imagined conversations, and expressed my feelings. I was proud of how far I'd come, but something inside me whispered that it was time to take everything I had learned and start putting it out into the world. I had to speak, not just in my head, out loud, with people, in real life. And so I took a deep breath and decided to try. It was a late Sunday afternoon when it finally happened. I had just finished a long walk in the park with my dog Benny, and we were standing by a small coffee truck near the lake. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and distant barbecues. People were laughing, talking, tossing frisbees, enjoying their weekend. As I stepped up to order my drink, I suddenly realized something. I wasn't planning my sentence in my native language. I wasn't translating in my head. I wasn't rehearsing. I just opened my mouth and said, "Hi, can I get a medium iced vanilla latte, please?" And the words came out like it was nothing, like I'd been doing it forever. And when the barista smiled and said, "Sure, that'll be $5, I didn't panic. I didn't freeze. I smiled back and said, "Thanks. It smells amazing out here today." And just like that, I had a real conversation in English out loud. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until it was over. I walked away from that coffee truck holding my drink like it was a trophy. My heart was racing, not from anxiety, but from joy. I was shocked. Not because I could speak, but because I finally believed I could. All those months of practicing silently, thinking in English, narrating my surroundings, expressing my feelings inside my head, it had all built up to this moment. And the best part, it didn't feel forced. It felt natural, like I had crossed some invisible bridge and was now standing on the other side. I think that's what most people don't realize when they struggle to speak English. They think the only way to get better is to speak more, speak fast, speak often. And yes, speaking is important. But speaking without thinking first is like building a house without a foundation. It might stand for a moment, but it won't last. What helped me most wasn't just speaking, it was preparing my brain to speak. And when I finally felt ready, my words came out not from fear, but from trust in myself. From that day on, I started talking out loud more. At first, it was in small, low-pressure situations. Ordering food, asking for help at the grocery store, chatting with the cashier. I remember one moment in particular. A young mom at the dog park complimented Benny and asked what breed he was. Normally, I would have smiled and said, "He's a mix," and let the conversation end there. But this time, I responded, "He's part golden retriever, part shepherd. He loves kids." Then she asked his name, and I told her the story of how I adopted him. We talked for nearly 5 minutes, and not once did I stumble over my words. I was in it. I was living in English, not just thinking it, not just imagining it, but truly using it to connect with someone. That experience changed everything. It made me realize how powerful it was to talk in your brain first. Because when you've rehearsed a thought 100 times in your head, saying it out loud feels like muscle memory. You're not guessing anymore. You're remembering. You're building from something solid, something practiced, something real. I started to trust my voice even when it trembled, even when I made mistakes, because now I had backup. I had all those hours of silent practice echoing inside me, holding me steady. Still, not every moment was perfect. There were times when I stumbled, times when I forgot a word or pronounced something weird. One time I told someone I was exhausted from all the dogs barking in my apartment, when I meant to say the neighbor's dogs, but I ended up sounding like I had 50 pets. We laughed, I corrected myself, life moved on. And that's what shocked me the most. Nobody cared. Americans, for the most part, don't expect you to speak perfectly. They just want you to be you, to show up, to try. And once I realized that, my fear shrank. I also started practicing out loud at home. Not full conversations, just small, simple things. I'd walk around the apartment saying things like, "Okay, I need to do laundry today," or "I should call my sister after dinner." Sometimes I'd read recipes out loud while cooking, or repeat lines from movies just to hear my own voice. It felt weird at first, like talking to a ghost, but over time it became part of my routine. My voice became my classroom, my apartment became my stage, and slowly, my confidence grew. One night, I decided to test myself. I stood in front of the mirror, looked myself in the eye, and gave a mini speech about my day. No script, no preparation, I just talked. Today was kind of a roller coaster. I had a rough start, missed the bus, spilled coffee on my jeans, but I handled it. I stayed calm, and I even made a new friend at the dog park. So overall, not bad. I'm proud of myself. As I finished speaking, I felt something shift. I wasn't just speaking English. I was speaking to myself. With honesty, with care, with pride. That moment stuck with me. The biggest shock came a few weeks later when I was in a Zoom meeting for work. My team was discussing a new project, and my manager asked for my opinion. Normally, I would have hesitated or typed my response, but instead, I turned on my mic and said, "I think the timeline works, but we might need to adjust the resources for phase 2. I can help coordinate that if needed." Everyone nodded. Someone said, "Good point, Olivia." And we moved on. I sat there stunned. I had just contributed. In English, in real time, in a professional setting. That was the moment I knew. I had changed. I had grown. And it was all because I gave myself time to prepare, in silence, in emotion, in thought, before speaking out loud. Speaking no longer felt like jumping off a cliff. It felt like opening a door I had already walked through 100 times in my mind. Every sentence I spoke had already lived inside my head, and because I had created that world in my brain, I could now share it with others. One sentence, one smile, one conversation at a time. Now, whenever someone asks me how I learned to speak English fluently, I don't say, "I practiced speaking every day." I say, "I practiced thinking every day." I let English live inside me first, in my thoughts, my emotions, my memories, and when it finally came out of my mouth, it wasn't forced. It was familiar. It was mine. So, if you're struggling to speak English out loud, here's my advice. Don't rush it. Talk in your brain first. Whisper in your mind. Narrate your life. Feel your feelings in English. Build a voice inside you that feels real and strong. And when you finally speak, when you open your mouth and let the words out, you'll be shocked, just like I was. Shocked by how much you already know. Shocked by how natural it feels. Shocked by how powerful you truly are. Because the truth is, fluency doesn't begin with speaking. It begins with thinking. Looking back on my journey, it almost feels unreal. I started with a quiet whisper inside my brain, a silent voice no one could hear but me. At first, it felt silly, almost childish, to talk to myself silently in English. But that whisper turned into a conversation. That conversation turned into confidence. And that confidence became my voice. Not just any voice, but a voice I built with patience, intention, and care. I didn't take the loudest path. I didn't jump into conversations before I was ready. I didn't force myself to speak just to meet some imaginary goal. Instead, I created space in my mind to think in English. I gave myself permission to be messy in silence before I was ever smooth out loud. This wasn't just about learning a language. It was about changing the way I saw myself. Each day I chose to narrate my life in English, I was doing more than learning vocabulary. I was changing the wiring of my brain. I wasn't just learning to say words, I was learning to live them. Every moment I used to waste, waiting in line, sitting on the bus, walking through the store, I turned those moments into mental workouts. I filled them with English thoughts. I made English my inner voice. And slowly, I stopped being afraid of sounding strange or making mistakes. I stopped worrying if I'd say the wrong word. I stopped seeing English as a test I had to pass and started seeing it as a tool to connect, to express, to belong. The turning point came when I realized I didn't need someone else to let me speak English. I didn't need a classroom or a teacher or a native speaker sitting next to me. I could begin by talking to myself. I could start with my thoughts. And that changed everything. The power was in me all along. It was in the quiet moments when I pretended I was chatting with a friend. It was in the boring hours when I turned my routine into practice. It was in the emotional days when I let myself feel in English, not just think. And it was in that magical moment when I finally spoke out loud, calmly, clearly, confidently, and realized I wasn't the same person I used to be. I wish more learners knew this secret. So many people chase fluency like it's a finish line, but fluency isn't a race. It's a relationship with your mind, your voice, your identity. It's a slow unfolding, a deep rewiring, and it starts where you least expect it. Not in a classroom, not in a textbook, not even in a conversation with someone else. It starts inside. It starts when you whisper a thought to yourself in English, and then another, and another, until one day you're not translating anymore, you're just thinking. And eventually you're speaking, and it feels as natural as breathing. So if you're reading this and wondering when your voice will come, when your turn will arrive, when your mouth will stop trembling, please believe me. When I say, your voice is already there, it's inside your mind, waiting for you to believe in it, waiting for you to talk to it, to nurture it, to trust it. I didn't wake up fluent one day. I built it thought by thought, moment by moment, until it grew strong enough to carry me through real life. And now, every time I speak English, at work, at home, with strangers, with friends, I remember the quiet beginnings, the invisible work, the silent bravery, and I smile. Because the loudest voices are not always the ones that started out loud. Sometimes they begin in silence. Sometimes they begin in the brain.